When Elias Maris crossed into the restricted zone, there were no fences left to stop him, only trees that grew too straight, too tall, as if they were watching. The sign at the entrance was a rust-bitten skeleton of what once warned people away. It had been scrubbed clean by time, wind, and maybe something less natural. He passed the threshold slowly, the crunch of gravel under his boots the first human sound this place had heard in decades. The town, if it could still be called that, was called Bauer. It had disappeared from maps in 1958. Not evacuated. Not bombed. Just erased. No fires. No explosions. No headlines. No survivors. Elias had spent 3 years finding it. Officially, Bauer never existed. No census records, no death certificates, no aerial photography after 1956. But then he found an interview from 1984, buried in a university archive, where a senile man referred to the place where the soldiers forgot how to die. That led Elias to microfilms. From microfilms to shipping manifests. And finally to a topographical anomaly on a decommissioned army map filed under Project Belchant, a Cold War research initiative with too many redacted pages. Bauer. Dead center of the anomaly. Now he stood at the edge of it, the dry Washington air electric with anticipation. The trees were too symmetrical. The wind too quiet. This place had been buried, but something here remembered. He carried only what he needed. A Geiger counter, 2 days' worth of Maris, his old handheld camcorder, a digital recorder, a heavy-duty flashlight, and a shoulder bag filled with spare tapes. His phone had no service, which he expected. The main street emerged from under vines and ash-gray dust, perfectly preserved like a diorama. Houses stood still, intact. Not dilapidated. Not looted. Just paused. A few even had curtains. One had a child's red tricycle toppled beside the porch steps. He walked past a gas station where prices were still hand-painted on a tin sign, 23 cents a gallon. Everything was wrong in the smallest ways. No rot. No mold. Even the wind smelled stale, as if preserved in a vacuum. The first house he entered was unlocked. Dust coated every surface in a way that felt unnatural, perfectly even, as if sprayed on. A teacup sat on the kitchen counter with cold black liquid in it. Not dried. Not spilled. He filmed everything. No narration. Just slow pans, ambient sounds. He'd done this before, ghost towns, abandoned mining colonies, forgotten prisons. But this place felt alive in a way the others didn't. In the living room, a radio sat on a table, unplugged. He leaned in. It clicked. Not static. Just the soft click of activation. Then a low hum. He stepped back. His Geiger counter ticked once. Then silence. The room stayed cold. Airless. Dead. He left the house and walked deeper into Bauer. The town center had a post office, a municipal building, a church. A small school. The flagpole still stood, but the flag was gone. He noticed every clock he passed, on walls, on stoves, on town signs, all frozen at the same time, 2:33 p.m. Something had happened all at once. He made his way to the church. The doors were closed but unlocked. Inside, pews were scattered, as if people had run in panic. On the altar sat a boxy reel-to-reel recorder. Unplugged. He pressed play. The tape whirred for a moment, then stopped. Then, without input, it played a few seconds of silence, and a breath. Then words. Subject 42 resisted implantation. Memory pulse failed. Relapse event triggered. Reset protocol activated. Host terminated. The voice was male. Cold. Measured. Military. Elias felt a sudden pressure behind his eyes, like a growing headache from inside the skull. Then another voice. This one female. Distant. Broken. I saw my mother die, again. But it wasn't my mother's face. It was mine. Click. End. Elias stared at the machine. It hadn't moved. The reels hadn't spun. Yet the sound had been real. He'd recorded it on his backup device. He left the church. Outside, the clouds hadn't moved. He checked his watch. It still worked. The time was 5:42 p.m. He'd been there over 3 hours. But the sun hadn't shifted. He decided to find the municipal building. If there were files, archives, anything official, it'd be there. He found the basement unlocked. The walls were lined with metal filing cabinets. Some still labeled in neat 1950s typewritten font: containment, protocol revision, subject retention, trauma logs. He opened one marked Belchant Internal. Inside, carbon copies of memos, photographs clipped together, anatomical charts with strange overlays. One page read, Project Hallow, Phase 2 date, July 5, 1957. Subject hosts remain unstable after pulse cycle exposure. Trauma imprint duration 14 to 17 hours. Host rejection increasing. Consider adolescent subjects for Phase 3. Signature, COL, Martinet, Nils clearance, ultra-verified. Another page had just one sentence, typed in red: you cannot remove what was never yours to begin with. He flipped through photos. Faces blurred in ways that couldn't be photographic error. Some had black eyes. Others no mouths. One had his own face, but much younger. That stopped him cold. It wasn't a look-alike. It was him. 17 years old. A photo he'd never taken. He dropped the files. Something above moved, barely audible. Like the scrape of a shoe. He froze, listening. No footsteps. Just a breath. Then silence again. He left the basement slowly, every muscle alert. The door creaked behind him. Back outside, the wind was gone. The trees didn't sway. He pulled out his camera. Reviewed the footage. Everything played as expected, until the church. In that clip, the moment he pressed play on the reel, the video distorts. A shadow appears beside him, for only one frame. It didn't move. It didn't blink. But it was there. He zoomed in. The figure wore a military coat. The name patch was unreadable. Its face was gray, stretched, featureless. In the next frame, it was gone. His breath caught. He turned slowly, scanning the road behind him. Empty. But something had changed. The tricycle on the porch now stood upright. Elias didn't run. He'd learned long ago that fear made noise, and noise attracted attention. He simply stood, staring at the tricycle, upright now, no wind, no tracks, no child. His mind darted between explanations. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe he bumped something, or the wind. No. The wind was gone. He walked past the house again, filming the porch, narrating quietly for his own sanity. Tricycle previously on its side. No sign of movement. No obvious mechanism. The door creaked. Not from the wind. He turned and aimed the camera. The front door was open exactly 1 inch. Nothing visible inside but shadow. A long, thick kind of shadow that settled where it didn't belong. Elias backed away slowly. Then something whispered, low, garbled, mechanical. No more room. He didn't wait for more. He crossed the street, careful not to run, and ducked into the school building across from the municipal hall. It was a one-story structure, mostly intact, with faded green lockers and maps still hanging on the walls. One map of the US was marked with red pins along the west coast. No chalkboards. Just wide white panels that looked more like brain scans than teaching tools. In one classroom, he found rows of chairs bolted to the floor and a speaker mounted to the wall. Underneath, a switch marked stimulation cycle. He flicked it down by instinct. The room hummed. Lights flickered. Then. Subject 12. Exposure Cycle 3. Begin trauma induction. Then a new voice. Female. Crying. It wasn't my fault. I swear to God, I didn't see them, a harsh buzz interrupted her. Then silence. The air thickened. Elias couldn't breathe. His head pulsed with pressure, a phantom echo rising in his ears. He felt dizzy, nauseated. He turned off the switch. The silence returned, almost too fast. He sat down in one of the child-sized chairs, breathing shallow. Then something crunched beneath his boot. He looked down. A baby tooth. Still red at the root. There were more scattered along the floor. He bolted upright and ran to the hallway. Doors slammed behind him as he passed, but no wind followed. The building wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. At the back of the school, he found a locked stairwell leading down. The door was heavy, industrial. Not school grade. It had no handle, just a slot for a badge. The paint read, Hallow Annex. Authorized staff only. Elias pulled out his portable UV light from his bag and scanned the area. A faint trail of shoe prints glowed, bare feet, oddly small. Childlike. They led to the door. And stopped. He pressed his ear to the metal. Faint hum. Then, breathing. No. Not breathing, whispering. Layered voices. At least 3. All talking over each other. Like a warped recording. Then he felt it. Something on the other side pressed back against the door. He stumbled away. He had to get above ground. Outside, the sun still hadn't moved. It hung, yellow and frozen, like a spotlight stuck mid-fade. He checked his watch again. It now said 7:12 p.m., but the shadows hadn't changed. Back at the municipal building, Elias loaded a second tape from the cabinet into his recorder. The label was handwritten, Cycle 8, Final Trial. He hit play. Dr. Holden speaking. This is the final cycle before site deactivation. Subject 0045 has shown persistent retention of foreign trauma memories. However, recontainment efforts have failed. Every subject exposed to the imprint reports seeing the gray man. We do not know if it is the trauma expressing itself or the original host. Subject 0045 was scheduled for erasure. But the child spoke last night. Said a name. Maris. We never trained him on that name. It's not in the files. But it matches the profile of a staffer from Facility D. Someone who left the program in '54. A whistleblower. It's statistically impossible. Elias froze. That was his name. His grandfather had worked military research. Elias remembered that from family arguments and vague references to the base. His mother never spoke of him. We are recommending total shutdown of Bauer. Containment has failed. Subject 0045's imprints are replicating. No body. No grave. We can't burn what we never owned. The tape ended. Elias rewound it and played the last 10 seconds again. We can't burn what we never owned, a low hiss followed. Then one last voice, unprompted. You remember now. He shut the tape off. The Geiger counter in his bag ticked. Once. Then again. Faster. Radiation. He scanned the room. Nothing. Then he noticed the floorboards. They pulsed slightly, breathing. As if something below was shifting. Stirring. He left. Back outside, he made for the diner near the outskirts of town. It looked untouched, with stools still aligned and faded menus on the wall. The words on the windows were reversed, like something had mirrored them. Inside, a single radio buzzed quietly. He approached, unsure if it was plugged in. Live feed begins. Hallo carrier now active. Welcome, Elias. He staggered back. The voice had come from the radio. Not the recorder. He hadn't said his name aloud since arriving. Then, slowly, the speakers began to hum. A tone. Low. Constant. Familiar. He'd heard it before. Years ago, in a documentary on number stations, strange Cold War broadcasts across shortwave radio that transmitted codes, numbers, and untraceable data. This tone matched one from a now-deleted archive, Station 12LZ. It had broadcast in 1958. The year Bauer vanished. He scanned the diner. Nothing moved. But the mirror on the back wall, behind the counter, reflected something. A man. Standing behind him. He turned. No one there. He looked back at the mirror. The figure stood closer now. Wearing a long coat, his face a blurred gray smear. Elias lifted his camera to the mirror. Click. The screen stayed black for 3 full seconds after the shutter. Then it showed only his own face, nose bleeding, eyes open wide. But he hadn't bled. Not yet. The door behind him opened on its own. He ran. Outside, the sun still hadn't set. But now it cast no shadows. Nothing around him reflected light. He sprinted to the edge of town, to the place where the tree line began. He crossed the border. And stopped. There was no forest anymore. Only Bauer. Still ahead of him. Still behind him. Still around him. He turned in a full circle. Every direction led back into town. The border had closed. Or never existed. He screamed into the air, slamming his fists on the ground, his voice hoarse and wild. Then he noticed the sound wasn't echoing. Bauer was swallowing it. He set up camp in one of the houses, refusing to sleep. But at some point, he must have. Because when he woke, his camera was on. Filming him. And in the video, right at the edge of the frame, stood a boy, no older than 7, wearing hospital scrubs, barefoot, staring directly into the lens. Elias paused the video. Zoomed in. The boy had no eyes. And the wall behind him, where no writing had been before, now had words. Etched deeply. I remember for you. Elias stared at the wall. It was smooth. But in the video, the etching was real. He played it again. The boy's mouth moved now. No sound. Just 2 words, you came. The video stopped. His recorder clicked on by itself. Transfer complete. Elias Maris retained. Carrier stable. Initiate new cycle. He threw it across the room. It landed softly, with a hiss. His nose began to bleed. He wiped it, dazed, and saw black on his fingers, not red. Something thicker than blood. He smelled it. Burned plastic. From within himself. The town was inside him now. Or he was inside it. You could drive past the entrance 100 times and never see it. Buried between miles of pine and rust-colored fog, the old service road wasn't marked on any map. Elias Maris had only found it thanks to a thumbnail-sized note in a declassified Army memo, Site D-147, Deactivated Perimeter, 1958. A scribbled line pointed west of Hanford, near a reservoir that no longer existed. Even now, with his van parked at the edge of the forgotten path, he second-guessed the entire thing. GPS was useless. The air tasted of iron and burnt ozone. The locals in Matawa, the nearest town, had told him there was nothing out here. One woman, pale as driftwood, simply shook her head when he asked. "That place eats memory," she'd muttered. "Go far enough and you won't come back the same." That had sealed it. Elias lived for places like this. He stepped out of the van with his shoulder-mounted camera and Geiger counter clicking in one hand. No signal on the radio. Just a soft, endless static like breath drawn too deep. He walked. The trees thinned out after half a mile, giving way to an artificial ridge of soil and concrete. Signs once nailed to fence posts had long since rusted to rot. But beneath the corrosion, he made out a faint name, sun-bleached to a whisper. Redoaks. The town wasn't on any civilian record. No census. No incorporation. But he'd seen it. Buried in footnotes and blacked-out sections of the Pentagon's 1957 Domestic Research Initiative. Not a nuclear town. Something older. Stranger. Inside the ridge, buildings. Houses lined the artificial cul-de-sac, their windows shattered, curtains frozen mid-motion. A school with a collapsed roof. A church with a tower split in half. Nothing touched. As if the people had been lifted out mid-step. Mail still in boxes. Plates still on tables. Coffee cups half full, rimmed in decades of dust. He whispered to the camera, entering Red Oaks. No human signs. Time of day, he paused. His watch was blinking nonsense. Uncertain. The Geiger counter clicked steadily. Not danger, but not clean. Background noise of another kind. He stepped into one of the homes. Inside, nothing moved. Not even dust. A child's chair still faced the window. On the wall, family photos had been scorched, not removed, not burned, just blurred. Faces erased, heads smeared like wet ink. He moved to the basement. There, tucked beneath a shelf of canned beans, was a locked metal case marked D-147/Echo Operations. He pried it open with a tire iron. Inside, 6 reel-to-reel tapes. Labels faded but readable. Number 1, Transfer Trial, Cohort A. Number 2, Cohort B, Dissociative Echo. Number 3, Containment Failure, TSP-13. Number 4, Dr. Mebane Personal Log. Number 5, Field Notes, Compliance Phase. Number 6, Unknown, Unmarked. He almost laughed. It wasn't just legend. It was real. And it hadn't been touched since 1958. Elias gripped the first tape and gently fed it into the battery-powered reel deck he brought with him. He pressed play. A woman's voice, clinical, flat. Trial 3. Subject 9A report secondary transfer completed. Subject speaks in Dr. Fowler's voice during REM cycles. Trauma is fully absorbed. Original memory is suppressed. Subject has no recognition of family. No recollection of own name. Transfer successful. Then a silence. Long and full of breath. Then, but subject 9A keeps saying, "You've made me hollow." Elias pressed stop. A draft slid through the basement, raising dust like breath from a hidden throat. He stayed the night in the school building, rolling out his sleeping bag on the gymnasium floor. He didn't sleep. Not really. Dreams scratched at the edge of thought, unfamiliar yet intimate. Faces behind walls. Eyes pressed to the back of his own eyelids. At 3:33 a.m. He woke with the distinct impression that someone had just been speaking into his ear. But he was alone. The real player, which he'd turned off, was spinning. Tape number 4. Log entry, Dr. Mebane. Date redacted. We've confirmed that memory functions aren't isolated. Trauma is modular. Portable. If we can make a soldier forget the war by giving the memory to another, maybe we can offload national guilt. Maybe we can cleanse the American conscience. But something came back. Subject 13 began repeating classified test phrases before he'd even heard them. The trauma looped. It nested. We've tried electric intervention, pharmacological dissociation, language resets. Nothing stops the return of the memory. They do not forget. The memory forgets us. Click. A second voice, male, panicked, not part of the recording, you shouldn't have come here. Elias sat bolt upright. The gym was empty. Moonlight spilled through broken windows. The reel spun dead. But the air had changed. Thick. Saturated. He could hear breathing in the rafters, wet, halting, like lungs remembering how to function. He grabbed the Geiger counter. Silence. Then a slow click. Then faster. Faster. Like a signal reawakening. By morning, the birds had gone silent. Elias walked to the old church tower. Its steeple was broken. Inside, hymnals lay open to blank pages. The altar had been carved open, inside, not a cross, but a single object. A copper helmet with 12 needle-like protrusions and black leather straps. A tag, Dream Retention Interface, Prototype C. Elias filmed it from every angle. The device was clearly made for someone's head, child-sized. Wires wrapped around it like roots growing backward. He opened the last tape. No label. The audio quality was rough. Voices warbled. A child's voice, faint but clear, "Are you me now?" Then static. "I don't want to be hollow." Then another voice, his own. "I'm sorry." Elias didn't sleep the next night. Not really. Sleep came in brittle flashes, like film strips misaligned. He'd close his eyes and feel his hands moving, lifting objects, opening doors, but he wasn't conscious of the choices. His own memories bent like reeds in a storm. He woke with dirt under his nails, not knowing where he'd been. At dawn, he checked the camera. The footage was intact. But in the segment he recorded last night, where he looked into the lens, he didn't blink at all. His reflection did. Worse, the reflection kept staring even after he moved out of frame. He packed his gear and left the church, heading west toward what the Army map labeled Administrative Block 3. The complex was underground, half-collapsed from decades of neglect. A rusted freight elevator waited at the entrance, doors open like a yawn. He climbed down the shaft by ladder. The air below was electric. You could feel it, like the way skin prickles before lightning. Every metal surface bore frost despite the summer heat above. He passed rooms filled with medical equipment, cot-sized beds with leather straps, and massive glass tanks now cracked and dry. A viewing window faced a lecture hall built into the earth itself. Rows of decayed chairs surrounded a glass wall where shadow puppets danced on the far side, his flashlight beam catching only movement, not form. In one office, the word Mebane had been scrawled in chalk across the window. Inside, he found a stack of old files sealed with wax tape and Army letterhead. Memo, for DoD Internal Eyes Only, October 17, 1957. Subject, LZ Program, Ethical Contingency. The Red Oaks Project continues to exceed expectation. Transfer efficacy between subjects 4B through 4F reached 94.6%, confirming the hypothesis that trauma can be encoded and decoded via directed neural stimulus. However, recent events suggest that memories, retained, are not behaving like memories. They're recursive. Autonomous. Subject 9A appears to have access to unfed data, information never entered into the recording matrix. During Test 12, 9A quoted the Bible in Latin, despite no prior exposure. Test 13, He began describing Project Bluebird operations word for word. We suspect the memory is evolving. Dr. Mebane recommends immediate halt of field trials and permanent containment of all transfer subjects. Handwritten note at the bottom, there is no such thing as a forgotten memory. Only a hidden listener. Elias sat down hard on the floor. He'd come here to expose a government black site. A Cold War atrocity. But this was something deeper. Something living. They didn't just test trauma here. They stored it. He reached for the sixth reel again, the unmarked one. The voice that had mimicked his own. He hadn't imagined it. He knew now, he'd been here before. Outside, the light was failing. Not fading, failing. As if the sun itself had dimmed, or memory of its brightness was slipping. He stood at the edge of town, filming the silent houses. And then he saw the child. A small boy, perhaps 8, standing barefoot in the street. Elias froze. "Hey, are you?" The boy turned. He had no eyes. Just deep black sockets like holes torn into wet paper. Then the boy spoke. "You gave it to me. Remember?" And he vanished. Elias ran. Not toward the van, not toward safety. Just away. But Red Oaks wasn't letting him go. The streets rearranged behind him. Houses he'd passed an hour ago stood in new rows. His compass spun. GPS locked. His camera began recording by itself. He ended up at the school again. The blackboard in the main classroom had writing on it now. "We are what is left when the memories go. We are the hollow men." And beneath that, in smaller handwriting, "We are waiting to be remembered. Please don't remember us." He fell asleep in the corner of the room, watching the door. In the middle of the night, a soft scratching woke him. Not at the door. At the inside of the blackboard. He approached. His reflection appeared, faintly, in the glossy slate surface. It raised its hand. Elias didn't. The reflection wrote something on the inside of the board. "Play the sixth reel." He did. The voice this time was not his own. Not a doctor. Not a test subject. It was many voices, overlapping. Male and female. Adult and child. All repeating the same 4 words in rhythm, "We were not asked." Then a pause. Then, "There are pieces of you missing, Elias Maris. We hold them. Come to us, and you'll be whole again." He threw the recorder. It didn't break. It kept playing. He smashed the blackboard with a chair. The glass cracked. Behind it, no insulation. No wall. A tunnel. Hand dug. Narrow. Just wide enough to crawl through. He hesitated. Then he crawled. The tunnel wound downward for 30 feet before emptying into a domed chamber lit by old emergency lights. And there, in the center, stood 20 chairs arranged in a circle. Each chair held a person. Alive. Eyes open. Motionless. IVs ran into their arms, and helmets, just like the one he'd found earlier, covered their skulls. The noise was overwhelming. Not loud, but total. The air buzzed with voices. Memory itself had a texture. He could feel thoughts crawling across his skin. One of the figures, an old woman, turned her head slowly and looked at him. "You brought the rest of you," she said. "Thank you." Her mouth didn't move. Elias turned to run, and came face to face with himself. No. Not a mirror. Another version of him. Wearing the same jacket. Same expression. But older. Frayed. His eyes were hollow. The other Elias smiled. "We are your continuity." Elias barely slept that night. The presence on the rooftop faded as dawn painted the sky blood red, but the feeling of being watched never left. He packed up his gear and resolved to find a way out of Red Oaks. He had to. This place was no longer a town. It was a trap, a labyrinth of memories and horrors clawing to surface. He started by retracing his steps, hoping for something that would lead him beyond the spectral fog of the town's ever-shifting geography. But Red Oaks mocked him. Streets folded back on themselves, buildings disappeared and reappeared like breathing creatures. His compass spun wildly, the GPS was useless, and even the sun seemed to flicker in place like a dying bulb. As he wandered, a familiar feeling crept over him, déjà vu. Not just the common kind, but the gnawing certainty that he had lived this exact moment before, that he was stuck in a loop. Every cracked sidewalk, every shuttered window, every stray dog with hollow eyes. It was all part of a nightmare playing on repeat. Desperation pushed him toward the forest at the edge of town. Maybe, he thought, if he could just cross the tree line, he could find the real world again. But the forest was no sanctuary. Trees bent and curved unnaturally, their leaves whispering secrets in voices only half heard. Roots pulsed like veins beneath his feet, and sometimes, out of the corner of his eye, he glimpsed figures, twisted shadows of people he once knew, or thought he knew. One figure stepped into the moonlight, a young girl with hollow black eyes, the same as the boy he saw before. "Why do you run?" she asked, voice like a chorus of distant echoes. "Because this isn't real," Elias said. "This place, it's broken." She smiled, revealing a mouth that seemed too wide for her face. "Real? No. We are what's left when reality fractures. We are memory made flesh. You brought us back." He clenched his fists. "I'm not like you." She tilted her head. "You already are." The forest thinned into an abandoned road. Elias followed it until he came upon a dilapidated farmhouse, its windows boarded but not fully sealed. He pushed open the creaking door and entered. Inside, dust motes floated in the weak light, settling on peeling wallpaper and faded photographs. On a rickety table, a small tape recorder lay waiting, as if placed for him. He pressed play. Static gave way to a voice, his voice, but younger, distorted. Day 27. Memory transfer process continues. Subject exhibits signs of self-awareness. Does not recognize the boundaries between his own memories and those implanted. Emotional feedback loops increasing. Subject identified as Elias Maris. The recording ended abruptly. A chill ran down his spine. He searched the house and found a hidden basement hatch. Taking a deep breath, he descended into darkness. Below, the air was damp and cold. Pipes groaned, and the smell of mold was thick. At the bottom, he found a long corridor lined with steel doors, each marked with numbers and names, some familiar, some not. One door read, Subject 13, Maris, Elias. His heart pounded as he opened it. Inside was a small room with a metal chair bolted to the floor and the copper helmet from the tapes. Strands of hair were tangled in the wiring, dried and brittle. Suddenly, the recorder on the chair clicked on, and a screen flickered to life. A man appeared, a doctor with cold eyes. Subject 13, if you are hearing this, the program has failed to contain you. The memories are leaking. The trauma is self-aware. If you cannot resist, you must become one with the archive. Only then will you find peace. The screen went dark. Elias sank to the floor, overwhelmed. He was not just a victim, he was a key, a carrier of a broken history that refused to die. Suddenly, a whisper filled the room. "Come back, Elias. We're waiting." The voices of the hollow men surrounded him, wrapping their cold fingers around his mind. He could see their faces, fragmented, ghostly versions of himself and others trapped in this endless echo. But inside him, a spark of something else flickered, resistance. He rose and ripped off the helmet. "Not today," he whispered. He fled the basement and raced back into the twisting streets. At the center of town, the old church bell tolled midnight, though the sun was still high. He realized then that Red Oaks was not just a place, but a wound, an echo of Cold War horrors, of experiments that shattered minds and erased identities. And it had been waiting for him to come back, to finish what was started decades ago. But Elias wasn't ready to become another Hollow Man. He had one last tape left, the unmarked reel that started it all. With shaking hands, he played it. The voice that emerged was not his own, but layered with many others, all overlapping in a haunting chant, "Remember us. We are not gone. We are the Hollow Men. We are the silence after the scream." The tape ended with a whisper, "Only through remembrance can we find peace." Elias understood then. To escape, he had to remember, not just the horrors buried here, but the humanity lost in the process. He raised the camera and began to record again. Elias sat cross-legged on the cracked floor of the old school's library, surrounded by tattered books and faded photographs. His breath came in ragged gasps as he rewound the tape again and again, listening to the layered voices of the Hollow Men whispering their secrets. He knew now that Red Oaks was not just a site of experiments but a place where memories were harvested and stored, where trauma was trapped in an endless cycle of repetition and decay. The Hollow Men were echoes of these memories, desperate to be freed, to be remembered, or maybe to be forgotten. But how? He looked around the library and his eyes landed on a thick leather-bound book lying open on a table. The pages were yellowed, filled with handwritten notes and sketches of strange devices, copper helmets, neural maps, and lists of subjects with strange annotations next to their names. On one page, a single phrase was underlined in red: "Memory is not lost. It is merely waiting to be reclaimed." Elias traced his finger over the words, feeling an unexpected surge of hope. He turned back to the tape recorder, pressed play, and focused on the voices. The voices told fragmented stories, snippets of lives stolen, moments of pain, joy, and terror locked away. The voices were the memories of those who had passed through Red Oaks, trapped and preserved like specimens. One voice stood out, clear and persistent. "We are the memory keepers, the watchers of the echoes. We are the Hollow Men, because the memories hollow us out." Elias's chest tightened. He realized the Hollow Men were fragments of himself and others who had been subjected to the experiments. Their trauma had been extracted, replicated, and shared, turned into an endless feedback loop that distorted reality. He rose, determined to break the cycle. His search led him back to the basement of the farmhouse where the steel doors lined the corridor like silent sentinels. He opened door after door, finding the remains of lives, personal effects, recordings, and sometimes, bodies preserved in suspended animation. At the end of the corridor, he found a final door, unmarked. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was empty, save for a single chair in the center, with a new copper helmet resting on it. A note lay on the floor. To break the cycle, one must become the memory. Elias hesitated but knew what he had to do. He sat in the chair and placed the helmet on his head. The world dissolved into darkness. Then, flashes, images from his own life, but twisted and interspersed with other memories, screams in the night, whispers in dead languages, faces of people who had never existed, and places that no longer existed. He felt his identity fray and reweave. The Hollow Men spoke directly now, their voices merging with his own. "Remember, Elias. Remember who you were. Remember who you are." Pain exploded behind his eyes as he fought to hold on. But slowly, clarity emerged. He was not just a carrier of trauma, he was a guardian of memory. And with that realization came power. When he removed the helmet, the world was still. The Hollow Men were silent. The town of Red Oaks shimmered, then began to fade like mist under the morning sun. Elias stepped outside. The forest no longer bent unnaturally, and the road stretched clear before him. He was free. But he carried the memories with him, heavy, raw, and alive. As he drove away, the tape recorder played one last message: memory is a curse and a gift. The hollow men are both prisoner and keeper. We are waiting to be remembered, and to be set free. Elias glanced at the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, he saw not his own reflection but the hollow men. Faint, translucent figures watching, waiting. He drove on into the coming dawn, a man changed forever by the ghosts of a forgotten place. The road stretched endless ahead, the horizon bleeding into mist. Elias's hands gripped the steering wheel as memories seeped through the cracks of his mind, fragments of Red Oaks, its secrets, and the hollow men that haunted him. Days blurred together. Food tasted like ash, sleep came in shattered fragments, and the voices in his head grew louder, at once pleading, warning, and accusing. He arrived in a city, bright, bustling, ordinary. But he felt like a stranger, a man walking through a dream where nothing was quite right. At a small cafe, he met a woman named Mara, historian specializing in Cold War-era psychological experiments. Something about her gaze was steady, compassionate, and when he showed her the tapes and his recordings, she did not recoil in disbelief. Instead, she said, "This is bigger than you realize." Red Oaks was one of many sites where they tried to weaponize memory itself. She pulled out a folder thick with declassified documents and photographs. Elias scanned them, images of copper helmets, clinical notes about memory transference, and reports of memory carriers who vanished without a trace. One photo stopped him cold. It was a grainy black and white image of a young boy sitting in a chair with the copper helmet on his head. The caption read, "Subject 13, Elias Maris, age 6. His breath caught. This was his childhood, erased and hidden. Mara looked up. "You're not just a survivor, Elias. You're a product, and a potential key to unlocking the whole truth." Together, they dove into the archives, uncovering how governments tried to harness traumatic memories to create perfect operatives, people who could carry the pain and memories of others, to gain knowledge and skills through psychic imprinting. But the experiments backfired. The memories were too strong, the trauma corrupted, and the carriers became haunted, fractured. Hollow men, living echoes of broken psyches. Elias felt the weight of the past crushing down. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why did I survive when so many others disappeared?" Mara shook her head. "Because you have a gift. A connection to the archive that no one else has." One night, Elias awoke to a noise outside his window. A shadow moved in the dark, a figure, indistinct but familiar. He grabbed the camera. Outside, the figure beckoned. Elias stepped out and found himself face to face with the reflection from Red Oaks, fractured, older, a twisted mirror of himself. "You cannot run from the memory," it said. "It is part of you now." Elias raised the camera and recorded. "I am not afraid." The figure smiled, and vanished. The days that followed were filled with visions and voices. The hollow men reached out through dreams, through flashes of the past and present colliding. But Elias felt a new strength. A resolve not to be consumed. He and Mara planned to expose the truth, to bring the hidden experiments to light. But deep inside, Elias knew the echo of Red Oaks would never fully leave him. He was both the carrier and the key. And the hollow men were waiting, patient and eternal. The night was thick with fog when Elias and Mara approached the abandoned government facility on the outskirts of the city. Decades of secrecy hung heavy in the air, mixing with the scent of rust and decay. "This is where the archive is," Mara whispered, holding a faded blueprint. "The heart of Project Hallow." The steel gates groaned open as they pushed through. Inside, the building was a labyrinth of dark corridors and shattered glass. Elias's footsteps echoed as they descended into the sub-basement. In the center of a massive chamber lay the neural archive, a giant apparatus covered in dust, but still faintly humming with residual energy. Rows of copper helmets, wires coiled like serpents, and monitors flickered weakly. The Hollow Men's presence was palpable. Elias sat in one of the chairs and placed a helmet on his head. Instantly, memories flooded him. His own, and those of countless others, layered like spectral voices inside his mind. Pain, fear, love, loss. The archive was a living, breathing organism of memory. The Hollow Men's voices merged with his own. Remember us, Elias. Remember all. He willed himself to hold on. With Mara's help, he initiated a sequence on the controls. A blast of static roared in his ears, and the walls seemed to pulse as the archive began to purge its memories back into the world. Elias saw the Hollow Men emerge, shimmering, fading figures. They looked at him with gratitude, then began to dissolve into light. The memories unshackled, the echo released. The oppressive weight lifted. When he removed the helmet, the chamber was silent. The Hollow Men were gone. Mara smiled softly. It's over. Elias felt both relief and sorrow. He had freed the trapped memories but carried their scars forever. Outside, the dawn broke. Red Oaks was a ghost no longer. Elias looked at Mara. We remember, he said. And we move forward.